Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Weather Center Nazario. Happy Friday, November 10th, 2023. If you haven't seen my YouTube short that I released earlier this morning, I'm wishing everyone out there a happy Veterans Day. Not only to those who have served, but those of you who are still currently serving and those who are getting ready to take the plunge, raise the right hand, and swear in and start your military career. Thank you so much for joining me on this great Friday afternoon, guys. I hope you've had a wonderful week, and I hope you're in for an exciting weekend for that matter. I have some good news to pass along to you today, so stick with me, guys. Let's fasten our seatbelts and jump right in. We're actually starting off on the National Weather Service radar for the lower 48 right now because take a look at this nice band of frontal activity we have transitioning across the mid-Atlantic states, parts of the southern northeastern states, down into the Gulf Coast states where you can see Texas, Louisiana, even parts of Mississippi, Alabama, spreading into Georgia and South Carolina. We're finally getting some good rainfall activity, and this isn't the end of it just yet. It looks like parts of the middle segment of the front have lost a little bit of that rainfall since it started to transition further into the southeast, but hold your horses because there's more relief on the way as we go into the middle parts of next week and another system begins to take shape in the upper Gulf of Mexico. Outside of that though, guys, if you look at the radar, this pretty much paints the picture across the board for the United States. We have maybe a little bit of onshore shower activity in Washington state to talk about, but other than that, we're looking at pretty crystal clear conditions outside of maybe a little bit of rainfall happening in eastern New Mexico. Now we're going to look ahead on our 12Z Euro chart, so as you go forward in time, you can see that we are sitting under a pretty calm pattern across most of the United States. Very massive high pressure sitting over the Great Lakes, kind of helping to drive that frontal system we're currently seeing moving into the southeast, further down into the Gulf and through the state of Florida eventually. And as you continue through time, the transition begins to take shape, and you can see our pattern in the upper levels, the jet particularly, is expected to get a little more aggressive. And look at that breakaway low pressure that's expected to transcend down along the west coast, deepen into a 993 millibar low pressure center, and then eventually bring potential flooding conditions for parts of California and the desert southwest. Some of our models have been very aggressive with this. Others are indicating in form of maybe 2 to 5 inches of precip with this, especially since it will be cut off, and usually those cut off entities off the west coast take a little bit longer to meander inland and finally begin to wash out as they go across the Rocky Mountains. So don't be surprised if we see some areas in California, maybe into areas of Arizona, New Mexico, where we see a little bit of rainfall accumulation as this system slowly transitions across the central and southern Rockies. As it continues westward, as you go further into the back end of this loop, you can see cyclogenesis is anticipated to take shape over the Texas Panhandle in form of a Texas low, and that's also going to help to reinvigorate the rain chances for the deep south for those of us who desperately need it. And if we go back to the beginning, let's go and turn our attention back to the southeast and the Gulf of Mexico, because as we go over the next 3 to 5 days, take a look at how our leftover frontal energy begins to merge with what you can't see on this chart. This is the surface, but if you were to look at 500 millibars, we have some extra vorticity coming across the deep south, paralleling the border of Mexico to the United States. That's going to help to amp up what we see in terms of cyclogenesis or low pressure development over the Gulf. And you can see a closed low really increasing the threat for widespread heavy rainfall as it continues to propagate off to the east, eventually upping our chances of rain here in central Florida. As you come on over to the 12Z Euro rainfall accumulation model, you can see we take this through time. There goes our first frontal line, kind of making its way through. Not a whole lot in the way of heavy rainfall to anticipate with this, but don't worry, because as you take it through the middle and latter parts of the loop, look at how we're expecting several inches of rain with that entity as it gets to working its way across the Gulf Coast, running parallel to the shoreline, if you will, before exiting off the southeast into the greater Atlantic waters. And as you carry this through to the very tail end of the loop, you can see another area of heavy rain beginning to work its way through. So it goes without saying, El Nino may be finally waking up, but nonetheless, the drought is looking at some relief as we go over the next 5, 7, and then 10 days. Just for further verification, we're going to transition down to our Caribbean AOY. We're looking at the UK model on the left and the Korean model on the right-hand side, because this is going to supplement 2 of my next big cases. Number 1, if you look at the UK and the Korean model simultaneously over the Gulf of Mexico particularly, we are looking at the possibility of seeing a very potent low-pressure system form up and head towards the Florida coastline. Now, no one hit the panic button. We're not expecting this to be any sort of tropical entity. This is going to be all upper level induced by the jet and that shortwave trough that's coming across the south, helping to spin this up on the tail end of the front that's currently moving through our area. So no cause for alarm. This is actually great news because we could see some increased thunderstorm coverage with this. Yes, maybe some occasional lightning strikes, elevated winds, and of course the aggressive seas out there in the Gulf of Mexico. But all in all, guys, this is going to really help to relieve where we've been seeing a lot of the heavy drought conditions for the last couple of months. Now, moving into my next point, if you go down over the Caribbean, I know we still have that area of interest highlighted at a 30% chance of development over the next 7 days, but honestly, guys, I'm starting to think that our models are finally picking up on how harmful of an environment we have down there, and I don't see those probabilities going up too much further as we go over the next couple days through the week and into early next week, because both the UK model and the Korean model alike have lost confidence that we're really going to see a whole lot of development down there. At the 850 millibar level on our UK model, very small level of spinach down there, nothing in comparison to the low it's anticipating to form up over the Gulf of Mexico, and this stops at 144 hours. Unfortunately, UK model is a mid-range model, but if you continue on further into the 12Z Korean model loop, you can see we do get a little bit of a low-level spin, but then it washes out almost as fast as it took shape. Coming on over to the Euro, there's going to be, once again, two parameters I want to cover with you guys. On the left-hand side, we have our mean sea level pressure chart, and on the right, we are still looking at our rainfall accumulation because CENTAM, Central America, you guys are not out of the woods for seeing another bout of heavy flood-inducing rainfalls. That's still on the table despite maybe not seeing tropical development. So if we look at the mean sea level pressure chart on the left-hand side, you can see tremendous amounts of increased precip activity already kind of trying to take shape down there. I haven't shown you the satellite imagery, but we are starting to see that onshore flow beginning to work its way through Central America, impacting Nicaragua, Honduras, and Belize, trying to spread further down into Costa Rica and Panama, kind of like we've been talking about the last several days now. But as you transition through the back end of the loop, notice how we do see an area of organized rainfall kind of move up into the Central Caribbean, affecting Dominican Republic, getting pulled in with that system coming out of the Gulf, but the Euro no longer has any type of low-level circulation forming up, and in fact, as that energy gets pulled out with that system in the Gulf and the associated trough supporting it, it looks like that's also going to take away that heavy rainfall from Central America. So, it's very interesting to see how we were coming very confident with tropical development, but now slowly but surely, especially the Euro and the Canadian model, we've been rapidly backing off on it. Of course, the GFS is still calling for a hurricane. I'm not going to show that to you guys because, again, you already know what I'm going to say about that. Now, if we transition very briefly to the right-hand side, you can see we are still expecting, albeit despite the good news, we're still looking at the possibility of getting some heavy rainfall accumulation, particularly in the southern periphery of Belize, Nicaragua, and Honduras, and maybe affecting a little bit of Costa Rica and Panama down there on the Pacific side of things, thanks to our monsoonal trough also having some of our energy pulled up by that trough that's going to help to vacate that tropical entity highlighted by National Hurricane Center. So we're not out of the woods just yet in terms of our potential flood risk for Central America, as well as Jamaica and the Dominican Republic specifically, as that energy gets pulled to the north and that heavy rainfall has nothing else better to do besides rain down, especially on Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Now we're coming over to the Canadian model and the ICON model because there has been a bit of a splitting difference between these two models in particular and the Euro for that matter. The ICON is usually very good with preliminary development of our tropical cyclones. We've seen it do a tremendous job as we've gone through hurricane season, so I do find this very odd that the Canadian model is in line directly with the Euro, but now the ICON is actually strengthening our system. So as you transition through time, it really doesn't matter which model you look at. We're just kind of comparing and contrasting right now. If you look at the left-hand side, the Canadian model does get a small area of low pressure forming up, but then as you see, there's really nothing else that kind of takes shape from it. Maybe a 1,008 millibar broad low-level circulation center. In comparison to what we've been predicting the last couple days, it looks like it has also lost faith and confidence that we will get a full-fledged tropical storm out of this. But then if you look at the ICON, we actually have a tropical storm predicted on our German model. If you tuned in for my yesterday evening tropics talk as well as my segment yesterday, I did discuss the possibility of this trying to drift to the east-northeast and then get pulled back to the north, specifically because of the way of our upper level pattern being situated. It does look like the ICON does develop this into a tropical storm, and at the very tail end of the loop, there is a very subtle jog to the north. This model only goes out about 180 hours, but if you watch closely, it does kind of jog up to the north there, headed towards Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. Maybe not necessarily as a full-fledged tropical storm, guys. We have a huge margin of error now with some models not calling for anything, and of course the GFS going full bona fide major hurricane, flexing its muscles, trying to go worst case scenario like it always does, and now the ICON calling for a moderate intensity tropical storm. So we're going to continue to investigate. We're going to keep watching, but this does make sense. If you look at the high pressure out there over the Atlantic and those lowering pressures over the southeast, southeast, it makes a pretty good argument that this thing could drift to the north before getting wiped out by our trough axes. This is exactly why I think we're going to see this system erased before it can really get its act together, despite what GFS and other models were preliminarily thinking with this forecast. If you take this through time, we're at the Euro 500 millibar level, and at first glance, we do have a very broad amplitude ridge down there, which could favor a little bit of tropical development, but as that system comes through along the southeast, here you have it. That's where our trough axis in the upper level is going to help to induce that low-level circulation I highlighted on our precip models for the southeast, helping to up our rain chances. As this transitions off to the east, notice how we get a little bit of lowering heights in the southern Caribbean, and as that system continues out into the Atlantic, it picks all that up, kind of like a crane, if you will. It scoops on down into the Caribbean, rips that moisture up with it, and it's never to be seen again. So now it's kind of an up-in-the-air toss-up. We do still have some favorability in terms of what we could see develop. It is likely we'll see an area of energy try to consolidate, but at this point, guys, again, like I'd echoed earlier in the week when I first started to analyze this, I don't really think we're going to get a whole lot of organization out of it, and now we're starting to see the trends as we get closer to development indicate that as well. Last but not least, we got to look at the ensembles, and if you look at to the right-hand side, we do have our GFS ensembles up. As you take it through time, we still have a large-scale agreement. We are going to see a major hurricane come out of that general area and kind of go all over the place. Guys, the GFS has been doing some very interesting things over the last 24 hours. Some of the model runs have it transitioning east-northeast before hooking out due east and then getting picked back up like so. Last night, 0Z was very interesting to see, and I really, really hope a lot of you guys out there did not hit the panic button and buy into it, because the GFS formed up a major hurricane crossing Jamaica, Cuba, and Haiti, paused it right over the Turks and Caicos, the eastern and southeastern Bahama Islands, kind of did two little loop-de-loops, and then kicked it back towards Florida. So, it goes without saying the GFS is up to its typical tricks. We're going to have to see how this shakes out. You can see the Euro is still kind of thinking we could get some kind of a low-level entity forming up, albeit we've lost a lot of agreement in terms of anything significant coming out of there. There's a huge split in the path that it could possibly take. Half of the members that do show up going up to the east-northeast, turning back to the north-northwest, kind of towards the southeast, and the last couple of leftover members just going fully out to sea towards Bermuda, maybe as a rainmaker or a very weak low-level center of pressure. So it goes without saying, we had a lot of good news to pass along in this video, and there is still some concerning news in terms of we still have something to monitor, and even though we're kind of getting closer and closer to the end of the calendar hurricane season, we do still have something highlighted by our official source, National Hurricane Center, so the Weather Center is going to keep up with it and kind of update it as we go along and give not only our preliminary forecast, but also ebb and flow with what National Hurricane Center is saying. But anyways, folks, we're wrapping up this Friday segment of Weather Center Nazario. Thank you again for joining me today, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure reporting on all these systems as we go into a brief window of very good weather across much of the AOR that we typically talk about on this channel, and we continue to wander about and kind of discuss what this mystery of a tropical cyclone looks like as we go into next week in the Southern Caribbean. We will not be doing a tropics talk tonight. That's why we did ours yesterday at 8 p.m. for Thursday to make up for the lack of a tropics talk tonight, guys, but we will have this segment releasing at 6 p.m. like always, and we will have another segment tomorrow, Saturday afternoon, despite the familial plans I have going on during the first half of the day. So keep in touch, make sure those notifications are turned on, because there will be some repetitive updates coming up, and I'm very excited to show you guys the fun and entertaining weather material I have in store for you as we get fully into the winter season. Thank you again for watching, guys. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Friday and a great weekend for that matter. We'll talk to you soon. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.